I found this passion. I was still so little. I was only 12, and I feel incredibly lucky to say that I truly think I did find my life's passion at such a young age. We've raised now $1.4 million since we've started, which is so hard to fathom. So I make sure that every night, even if it's just to myself, I remind myself to look back on the day and just think of one thing that made me smile. But I know that while ever I am here, I will try to do the right thing and try and help people and try and be here.
Well, hello, Greaterverse listeners, and welcome to the latest episode of the Greaterverse. This is a podcast where we offset the endless stream of bad news with stories of hope, bravery, and joy. Today, I'm interviewing a remarkable young woman, Molly Croft. Age 12, Molly was diagnosed with a rare form of aggressive bone cancer, enduring treatment that removed most of the bone in one leg and part of her lung. She took that experience and transformed it into a mission to fundraise as much as possible to advance research into this horrible cancer that impacts young people the most. She's dedicated a lot of her time to supporting young people facing illness and adversity. She volunteers with the Kids with Cancer Foundation, represents the mental health charity Stand Tall, and co-founded the Tie-Dye Project, of which you'll hear more later. And because she is an absolute legend, Molly has helped raise over $2 million for children's charities and was recognised last year as a 2025 New South Wales Volunteer of the Year. This podcast is about overcoming challenge, gratitude, people power, and rainbows. So, Molly, welcome to the Greaterverse. It is absolutely fabulous to have you here today.
No, thank you so much. Across different countries. So I feel I'm really excited that we've been able to have a chat and super keen.
I think I said to you how I came across your story was reading it in the ABC in Australia, and I was just so inspired by what you had done and the fact that you're still very young and you've achieved so much. Just can't wait to find out more about this sort of crazy intense journey that you've been on and all of the wonderful things that you've been able to make out of really difficult circumstances.
Oh, no, thanks, Emery. I'm ready to dive in. I'm an open book, so ask me anything. Ask away.
Setting up your business and setting up your charity, what motivated that all?
I think to understand kind of what motivated it, I think you have to go right back to the beginning. So growing up, I know it sounds very cliche, but I think I have to start there. Growing up, I was your happy-go-lucky country kid. I was from a small country town in New South Wales, and I was obsessed with anything to do with sport. But life always wasn't the easiest. I was bullied really badly growing up, and I kind of found my place in that about like year 4, year 5 area. I'd moved schools and I began to flourish, but I definitely found my place within sport. And so sport became my life, and I loved everything to do with it. I think I was a netball or basketball core more than I was at home. I played a week worth of basketball in Broken Hill, and I came back from that weeks and I had a bit of a sore calf muscle. So I went to a physio, and they told me that I had a torn calf muscle. I was 11 years of age at the time and I knew everything. And so they told me to rest it. But as I said, I knew everything. And so I rested it, but it still didn't get any better. But I had state netball coming up in July. And so I played through those few months with that bit of a sore leg. When ended up playing netball in July, I played 18 games of netball over 3 days. And I came back from that, with my leg. We thought I had shin splints. I'd been taping it over the 3 days and we came back from that, but it wasn't getting any better. It was really, really bad. My leg began to lock, so I'd be able to straighten it and bend it at points, but I wouldn't really be able to move it. There was no motion there. So I went to a chiropractor, and he had a look at it and just pretty much said he didn't want to touch it and to go get an MRI. So that's what we did. Went and got an MRI, and pretty much within the week, where on my 12th birthday, the 27th of July in 2018, I was diagnosed with high-grade metastatic osteoblastic osteosarcoma, which is just a really long name for bone cancer. From there, my family and I didn't go home. I started my treatment the next week. From there, I had 27 rounds of chemotherapy and a major operation where I saw a majority of the bone in my right leg be removed. It was tough. There were some of my worst days, but at the end of the day, I'm still here. And so I can sit here and say that I am so lucky. A lot of my friends that I went through treatment with are no longer here. And so when you ask the question, kind of what was the passion around starting the tie-dye project and starting all my fundraising and public speaking, I think the passion was knowing that they would be doing the exact same thing if they had the chance. And so while ever I am here, I will use my voice. Unfortunately, sarcoma is a really high-risk cancer. My days are still not guaranteed, but I do live life to the fullest when I'm not, and that includes sharing my story and trying to raise a bit of money and create a bit of change along the way.
What happened after your diagnosis and after that time in hospital?
Yeah, so I kind of left hospital. I got the all clear for the first time in May 2019. I was super excited to go home. Obviously, once again, it was a bittersweet moment. My family and I had been there for 292 nights, pretty much straight. It became our home, became our family. And so leaving that behind, I think when you're living at somewhere like Ronald McDonald House, being so close to a kids' hospital, you have this feeling that you're wrapped up in cotton wool. If anything goes wrong, people will be there to help. But going back home, 6 hours, I live 6 hours away from the hospital. And so I felt like I was leaving that safety and that support network behind. As well as that, I was also leaving people who had seen me on my worst days behind as well. And people like that, they are family, and I still keep in regular contact with them. And so from there, it was pretty much instant. I knew that I wanted to do something to give back. So I started Molly's Mission originally, and it was to raise enough money to cover the 292 nights my family stayed there, in theory. And so pretty much just I found this passion. I was still so little. I was only 12, and I feel incredibly lucky to say that I truly think I did find my life's passion at such a young age. And, some people don't find that for years, or some people never find it. And so to say that I found it so young is once again something I'm so grateful for. But life from that point wasn't easy. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. I got home. I was home for about 2 weeks, and I developed a life-threatening infection in my prosthesis. So I had an internal prosthesis, which meant that all of the bone in my leg had to come out. But during that time, as I said, I was fundraising, and I was finding these moments where, even though I was going through something so hard again and something vastly different than what I'd gone through before, I still found this love of trying to give back, and realizing that I was so grateful to still be here at all. I began to share my story, and it was all about jumping on board. So with the help of Ronald McDonald House, we got people like the New South Wales Blues football team, we got the Wiggles, we got, and then like local business as well. Everyone was jumping on board Molly's Mission. And so by the July, so that started in the May, by the July, we had raised close to $200,000, which was just at that time, I couldn't fathom this amount of money. It was crazy. I still struggled too. But I found in that moment that if I could be brave enough to share my story, then most people were so kind and generous enough to want to help. And so from there, I was lucky enough to start something with Amy Parmenter, who I met originally during my cancer journey. Amy was playing for the Giants netball team at the time. She was Australia Diamond, and she met me, and we just had this connection. As I said, I was growing up, I was super sports crazy. And so I don't know why she thought so much of me, but she did. Because I think I just looked up at her and smiled the whole time, and just giggled at her. But for some reason, she felt this connection. And so she gave my mum her number. And I don't think there was a week that went by that Amy didn't come visit me in hospital. So she became like another big sister to me. And it was also during that time when I was fighting infection, literally at my bedside in hospital, that we kind of came together. Amy every November for a few years before had just tie-dyed around Christmas with her sisters in memory of her mum, Jilly, who Amy lost when she was 15. And she had this idea that she wanted to create something bigger with that. She wanted me to jump on board. And so we came together and we established the Tie-Dye Project, which is now our registered charity. It was established around this idea that sarcoma and cancer is such a terrible space to be in. A lot of the time there isn't a lot of hope, but we could be that color, we could be that rainbow. We also have such a young volunteer cohort. We did a video. I remember the November just gone, we did a video and it was like, what's everyone's favorite thing about tie-dye? And I was watching it back, and I think there was like half of the people were like, it's just like my Christmas. And for me to hear that as someone who, I didn't choose to be put on this path. I unfortunately, you don't choose to get sick. No one does, but that was my path. However, people like Amy and people who choose to volunteer and people who choose to buy our products and support us, they're choosing to come along with us, and that in itself is something that I don't take for granted. I think that I look at them all and I think I must look crazy every year. We have at this stage where we are now on the Sunday of the last day of our festival, we have like all the stall open and we have a netball carnival going on and we have food trucks and it's absolute colourful chaos, but it is chaos. But I sit there and I watch all these people have smiles on their face and all just doing good things and trying to help do something good, and you can't feel anything but grateful. We have a whole army of people wearing tie-dye shirts and starting conversations, and early diagnosis is key. And that rainbow side of it, every night my mum and dad would ask me what my rainbow was in hospital, and I'd have to think of one thing that made me smile, and without fail, they asked me every night, and I'd have to find one thing, and some days were really hard, but I was always able to find something, and so we came up with this idea that we could try and make a difference, and we decided that we wanted to go into the research space because that's where we felt we could make the most difference. And our first year together, once again, just blew up. We thought that we might make a few $1,000s if lucky, but we raised $25,000 in our first year. It's grown so much since it used to be a weekend event. It is now a week-long event every November. We now tie-dye around 5,000 products over a few days and raise much more. We've raised now $1.4 million since we've started, which is so hard to fathom. We've supported 13 major projects in the sarcoma space and been able to fund research positions, and as a 19-year-old now, I'm still so young, to be able to give back to a community that literally saved my life is something I don't take for granted at all.
And you've mentioned those rainbows. Can you remember any of those rainbows that were particularly special to you?
Well, it's still one of the biggest life lessons I've learned. So I make sure that every night, even if it's just to myself, I remind myself to look back on the day and just think of one thing that made me smile. But honestly, looking back, they were the most silliest things. I'm honestly, as I said, I was in hospital for a very long time, whether it be my initial treatment, my infection, my relapse, all up. Way too many nights than anyone should have to spend there. But very proud to say I've actually never eaten a hospital meal. I refused. I don't know. I never actually had one. And so I remember one day mum and dad asked me, and they're like, what was it today? And I was like, guys, it was the fact that my hospital meal never even turned up. But yeah, there was definitely one every day. There wasn't a day that went by that I didn't find a reason to smile and a rainbow.
I think it's quite an achievement that you managed to not have a single hospital meal, and that just adds an additional layer of respect.
My dad says that he was like, mum was very much slept by my bedside every night. But dad was like, I had one job and it was Uber Eats, which honestly couldn't be more grateful for him. They both played their roles very well.
What a phenomenal thing that you've done. And I know that the funding that goes into osteosarcoma isn't big, and that's one of the reasons that you decided to focus on it and focus on research.
Yeah, sarcoma is a cancer that kills more 15 to 29-year-olds than any other type. It was one of the first cancers ever discovered, but it is often referred to in the medical space as the forgotten cancer because it receives less than 0.1% of government funding, which means that the treatment for sarcoma hasn't changed in over 40 years. None of the money that is raised pretty much goes to costs. It all goes straight into research.
With the fundraising that's taken place, what are some of the things that people have done to support you on this fundraising journey?
Yeah. I mean, people, all different types of things. I guess the awareness side of it is just as important as the money raised. And so people just getting out there and giving it a crack and having a go. As I said, we get hundreds of volunteers down to our events, wanting to volunteer and help out. Without them, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. I've had a beautiful little friend, Mia. She's just entered her senior years of school, but she has now shaved her head twice. She absolutely rocks it. She's very stylish, way more stylish than me, but she has done that. So things like that, and then like media outlets getting on board. I remember it was going into my year 10 formal, and I just had surgery in my lung. It's organised to get me into Camilla, and for these beautiful girls at Camilla to find me a dress and make me feel beautiful. And as a little girl who had lost her hair at 12, to feel beautiful was something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I feel there's been so many things that have helped me personally along the way, or helped fundraise and that sort of stuff, but none of them are taken for granted, whether it be big or small.
It sounds like the success of the tie-dye project and the fundraising is everyone finding a different way that they can contribute. So given you spent so much time in and out of hospital, how did you continue your schooling?
I pretty much left school in year 6 and didn't really get back until about year 11. And then during that time, obviously, I'd had to grow up so fast. I was, having to deal with things that nobody should have to deal with, let alone a child, and to deal with having to sit in the classroom and being told that the biggest thing in the world is getting the essay in on time. When in my mind, obviously, it was important, but there were so many other things going on. My high school, I never loved. I never felt like I belonged there. And if I'm being honest, I was very ready to get out as soon as I could. But I'm very proud to say that I stuck it out and I finished year 12. I think I graduated with about a 60% attendance, but I graduated, and I got the certificate, and then much my parents discussed, within a few weeks I'd pretty much moved down to Sydney. I spent Christmas there and moved down to Sydney, and have just found my people and flourished here since. I'm now at university down here. I against all odds I got in, and I'm loving what I'm doing. I'm doing a Bachelor of Social Science, majoring in like politics and media and comms, and I'm just loving every second. The person I was before I moved down here is a very different girl than she was, and I think that it just showed, and just because I'm so happy and I feel like I've found my people down here.
Everything you said just resonates, because I think if you find the right people around you, find your tribe, it just opens so many doors. It sort of lets light in, it lets you be yourself, and that's so important.
And I say that, but I am also so grateful for the Dubbo community, when they rallied around me during my cancer journey, and ever since. I think my mum's Facebook, if she ever puts posts up, I get the whole Dubbo community on there, and making sure that they're backing me. And I had, throughout my journey, I had this like Facebook page. It was called Molly's Army, and boy did I have an army behind me. I'll never take for granted the love and support that I got from them. I know that they made it so much easier, and I know that a lot of people are still watching, even if it is from afar, and I'm so grateful for them, and I'm so grateful for their support always.
And what do you think are some of the things that helped you most on your healing journey?
I think for me, community and just being around people and trying to make the day a little bit easier with a smile. And I think that was the biggest thing that helped me. I'm so grateful for that, and meeting, other kids. I remember I met my absolute best friend, Toby, during my cancer. Toby found out that he was terminal. He had leukemia, and we kept in contact, and since then grown up a little bit, and when his parents, said, "What do you want to do?" His answer was to come to Dubbo and see me. And just because we got each other, there was no need to explain. And so he came to Dubbo and we spent a little while together. He spent some time at the zoo. And then the week that he passed away, I went up and visited him. And I think that it's kids like that who showed me real courage and strength. And but we were walking around the zoo and he was in a wheelchair. And because of my prosthetic leg, I have a bit of struggle with mobility. But maybe he turned to me, he's like, "Molly, do you want my wheelchair? I'm happy to walk." And I think I will never forget that moment, because I knew how sick he was. He knew how sick he was. And a few days later he passed away, but he was still willing to offer up, you know, what he needed as well, to try and make my life a little bit easier. And so I now look back and I think of my journey, but I know that I do in the memory of beautiful people like him. And my journey, it may have been really tough, and my life's journey now, there's many days that are not easy. I still struggle with the after effects of cancer and mobility issues. I'll struggle with, I'll have to look down at fertility down the road and all of that stuff. But I know that, my journey was a lucky one, because I got to meet people like him and I got to see what real strength was. And so for me, it was connection and community that made it easier, but a lot of that came from people like him and other kids that were going through it, because they just get it and you don't have to explain it. We're very lucky now. Once you're in the childhood cancer space, you have a family for life, and you have a family within other people who have been through it. You have a family within doctors and nurses, and they are people who get it. And so, as I said, you never want anyone to have to, but it is this sense of warmth and this sense of comfort when you are around people who just get it and do understand.
So you mentioned, Molly, that there was a group of people at the hospital who took care of you and looked after you, and that you're still in touch with a lot of them.
Yep.
What made what they did for you so special?
My oncologist said to my parents right at the start that he was going to do whatever he needed to do, but he was also going to tell me everything that was going on, because he said, as soon as I lose hope in him, I will lose hope in my treatment. And the kids' hospital and Ronald McDonald House and everywhere, all the people that helped me along the way, all of the foundations, not one of them ever made me lose hope. And that in itself, there was points where, I'm sure everyone was thinking, I look back on photos now and I can't even recognize myself. I was so sick. And I look back and you would have thought that, I wasn't going to make it. I was so sick. And I think that I never felt that way when I was going through treatment, because they never made me feel like there wasn't something they could do. My oncologist is now retired, Professor Kelly. He called himself the Walking Archives, because he just was an incredible knowledgeable man. And then obviously in the space that I'm in, fundraising, I'm so lucky that I get to work with a lot of the oncologists and a lot of the medical team. So maybe I've just really scammed the system, and it's my way that I get to stay in contact with them all, because I never want to leave them. But either way, I have a lot to do with them. And then I'm doing a lot of work at Ronald McDonald House and showing people around that place and kind of sharing it from a point of view of a patient living there, which is nice, getting to run a few tours. So definitely nobody can get rid of me once I'm glued there. But no, I'm so grateful for them, and truly they did save my life. And so I owe it to them.
I'm sure they're extremely grateful that you're still connected and you're doing so much, right? Not just with the fundraising work that you're doing, but just by being there, showing up, sharing your story. And how do you process everything that's happened?
I think that, I can sit here and say I do have a good grasp, and I think a lot of that comes from being able to talk and share my story. But that said, there is tough days, and there's days that I haven't probably processed, and I'm not very I don't often talk about that. There's days that I probably haven't processed, and I'll be here and I'll just ring mum, and it'll just be one of those days where my friends, might have gone and been able to, go to the beach and walk down the beach and not have struggled to walk down the beach. And I'll come home and I will mourn that life that I used to have. But I'm really big with this idea that, happiness for the life that I have now and mourning the life that I lost. can sit side by side together. Being grateful for still being here but feeling sad some days can sit side by side. And sport, I still love it, and I wish I could do it. I am now no longer allowed, but I definitely feel like I do have a good grasp on the fact that I've lost stuff, but I just have to remember what I've gained as well. I think I'm a much better person for having gone through what I have.
You've overcome a lot, and I can imagine it's really difficult when you love something so much not to have the opportunity to engage with it in the same way. But what are some of the other things that you've discovered now you have that space in your life?
Exactly. And that's it. I obviously, and sport's such a superficial thing, and it's not that it was, the sport that I lost. It was just the old Molly that I lost, and so having to find something new. But I think that I have just found the value in taking life day by day, and I don't think that I would have found that if I hadn't been through this journey. I think that sometimes in life we can all just look for the next thing and what are we doing next, and not worry about what we're going through right now. But I know that in a second our right now can be taken away. And so I value my friendships, and I value my family, and I value being able to have the opportunity to sit in a uni classroom and learn, and I think that that takes up a lot of my time. I always loved loved any sport, but if it was a team sport, I loved it 10 times more, because I just loved having a team around me, and I was lucky enough to often fall into leadership roles within those teams, and to be able to develop myself as a leader. I think that I'm very much about, a leader leading from the front, but also being able to be led. And so to create, friendships and teams around me that we can lead together and create some real change is something I've also found, and found some values in that. And then, to be able to share my story and get up on platforms and stages and say with such confidence that, I am lucky to be here and share a story that is hard to share. I may have lost some of, materialistic things or things that I used to be able to do, but in mindset perspective and just everyday life and looking, my headspace, I have gained a much clearer one of those.
Yeah, you've got a very clear value system, and it's really evident that community and connection are just such integral parts of your life, and so important, I think, in general, in helping people enjoy life, not just survive life, but actually enjoy life. What has been the high point of this whole experience and your life today?
For me, I think there's been so many high points. I think it is not just knowing that I'm trying to make a difference. I got a message of a beautiful little boy today who we were able to, he's going through cancer treatment and going through a bit of a tough time, going through sarcoma treatment, and all he wants to do is go camping. And so we were able to find a bit of a way to help out in that. And I got this beautiful message of this boy who was just so grateful in knowing that, there was someone out there just thinking of him. I've been lucky enough to win so many accolades and awards and do so many incredible things, have so many incredible opportunities, but it's in moments like, sitting on my bed today and receiving a message like that I definitely feel that my bucket is the fullest.
Being able to, as you say, be that beacon of hope for people who are going through the same thing, and knowing that there is a pathway. Since you've been diagnosed, there have been so many things that have surprised you as you've gone through.
Yeah, definitely. I think that my biggest surprise would just be that people, if they hear your story, if you're brave enough to share it, as I said, most people are kind enough to want to help in their own way, however that may be. But they want to help and they want to care, and I think that as a family we were surprised by just how many people wanted to help. We had an influx of love and an influx of kindness, and without that, I think we would have felt very alone. So I think wasn't surprised, but I think that, it always takes you a little bit back when you're like, wow, everyone wants to help. And I probably had to learn in a different way again, that, not everything is always going to be, black and white, and sometimes there's going to be things that you don't always agree with, but you just have to hold your values strong, and remember the person you are. And so I think I've had a lot of learnings in my life, but I think that I'm very grateful for every one of them, and I don't look back on any moment and regret it, because I know that at least I've learned something from it.
You have an amazing ability to be very self-reflective, and you're very mature, and you have such a positive way of framing things. I wanted to ask if you had a message for any kids who might be going through what you went through, and something that you could share with them.
I think one of my biggest messages for, kids, or, any person going through a health battle, or any just hard battle at all, um, I think that, not every day is going to be easy. That's for sure. And I can't sit here and say that it is. And life will be hard, and there will be challenges, and there will be moments where you might feel like it's all too much and you just want to give up. But know that you have people around you, you have medical team, you have, if you have a family around you, you have your friends around you, and, you have me. I'm here, and I'm very glad to say that, my messages and my Instagram, and I'm very easy to be contacted. And so I'm here. As I said, I feel so lucky to be here. And sharing my story and helping people out along the way, I think is truly what I have been left on this earth to do. I know that while ever I am here, I will try to do the right thing, and try and help people, and try and be here. So I am here if anyone needs anything, but also just lean in, be vulnerable, let people know when you need help, because can't do it alone. Sometimes we do need to lean on each other.
You talk a lot about gratitude, and gratitude for each day that you've got. If you were to share with other people how they can be more grateful, what would you say? How can other people practice gratitude?
I think it is it's so simple, and it is, it sounds easy, and I 100% get it's not all the time. I think my biggest piece of advice would just be to give it a good hard crack, give it a look. Lay in bed at night. You don't have to tell anyone, but it does make the next day a little bit easier. If you can go to bed with this mindset that the day before it might have been tough, it might have been hard, but there was one thing that made me smile. You wake up the next morning, and you are waking up the next morning looking and thinking about this fact that there's going to be something that makes me smile today.
You've just got joy, and you've got such light, and you're an incredible human being. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
And it's just been a joy, and thank you for your messages of support to people going through a tough time, and also, your advice on how to find gratitude. I think that's really powerful. So thank you, Molly.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed chatting.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me and Molly today in this conversation. I can honestly say I struggle to keep it together at times, but what an incredibly inspiring story Molly has, and what an absolute light she is bringing into this world. If you enjoyed this podcast episode, please like, share, subscribe, follow for more amazing stories of incredible people doing incredible things. I will be sharing the details of the tie-dye project and ways that you can stay connected with Molly. Until next time, Greaterverse, over and out.